Good day, fellow babies. Glad to have you back on the Pach-Attack. Okay, I'm going to answer two questions in one on this one. We got a question from Professor of Ninja Mastery 101. Why did Pandemic go out of business? Who owns the rights to their games now? And we got a question from Twitter from @Darmist57. What effect do you think the departure of the Doctors will have on Star Wars: The Old Republic and BioWare? Now, the reason I'm answering these questions together is that they're related. If you remember back in 2008, Electronic Arts purchased Pandemic and BioWare, both companies, from Elevation Partners for $860 million. Well, at the time, when Electronic Arts put this all onto their income statement and balance sheet, they actually showed financially that $260 million of that payment was for what they called work in process. That was reimbursement to Elevation Partners for funding the development of a bunch of different games. The two that we know for sure were in development were Mercenaries 2 and Star Wars: The Old Republic, and I'm sure there were more. So they paid about $600 million for the two studios, $260 million for the work in process. The Pandemic and BioWare guys got a chunk of that and probably the bulk of that. So they were pretty wealthy guys. So the reason Pandemic went out of business is that EA made the decision in, I believe it was late 2009, to close Pandemic. Mercenaries 2 came out, didn't do particularly well. The Saboteur came out, didn't do particularly well. And EA decided that the Pandemic studio wasn't as creative as perhaps they had hoped. So they closed the studio. I think that the founders, Josh Resnick is one, had plenty of money, and they decided that it just wasn't worth the effort to keep up with the grind. And I think that, the same answer for the Doctors, I'll get to that in a second. But these guys have a lot of money, and they don't work just because they're greedy. They work because they derive a great deal of pleasure out of making games. And when that becomes not fun anymore, they stop working. So let me finish the Pandemic question. EA owns the rights to their games. Now, remember, Pandemic made Star Wars Battlefront. I mean, they made other Star Wars games. That's LucasArts. Nobody owns, LucasArts owns the rights to Star Wars games. But Pandemic owns the rights to Mercenaries and Saboteur. Pandemic didn't own the rights to Destroy All Humans. That's owned by THQ. So some Pandemic games are made on a contract basis, like Star Wars Destroy All Humans. Some were made as proprietary titles, like Saboteur and Mercenaries, and EA owns those. On the BioWare side, what effect do I think the departure of the Doctors will have on Star Wars: The Old Republic and BioWare? Huge. Those guys are phenomenal. I mean, those guys, I don't know. Ted Price at Insomniac was interviewed by a website asking about those guys leaving, and he said they had the most amazing combination of creativity and humility he'd ever seen. It's true. These guys acted like they were just the luckiest people in the world, and all this stuff magically happened because they had assembled such a talented staff. The truth is, yes, they did assemble a talented staff. You got guys like Casey Hudson working on Mass Effect. He's phenomenally talented, but so were the Doctors. The Doctors had the magic touch. Pretty much everything that studio ever did got a high 80s or better rating. I mean, they were just really good. They consistently had games coming out in the 90s, and they're going to be missed. And I think that here's the editorial comment on both of these studios, Pandemic and BioWare. I think that the quality of games is better when you have quality people making them. And I think that you as gamers are naive if you think that everybody's greedy and that everybody works just for the dollars you pay for the games. That is just not true. A lot of these guys have more money than they will ever spend. I mean, Josh Resnick, I read, bought his mother a trip in space on the Virgin space, space shot whenever that goes off. They don't need any more money. They don't work for the money. They work because they get so much joy out of making you guys happy. And I think that we've seen a lot of nasty stuff lately. I think the whining about the ending of Mass Effect 3 really very much could have been the straw that broke the camel's back for the doctors. I mean, if you look back at the BioWare blog, Ray Musica said in the blog that he notified EA in April of his intention to retire in November. April was right about when all that Mass Effect 3 noise was hitting. I think you guys who were out there whining vocally about how BioWare screwed you out of a happy ending to Mass Effect should really look in the mirror and wonder now, you're not getting anything like those games again with the two doctors gone. I mean, you might get good games, they won't be the same. That is like making a Godfather movie, you know, without Coppola being involved. I mean, it's just not the same. And I really think you whiners out there should think twice about it, because your whining just pisses everybody off. It pisses off creative people, and every once in a while they say they'd rather go do something else. So you've got Greg Zestruk, who's going to go pursue his passion for craft beer, and you've got Ray Musica, who's going to pursue his passion for helping animals, which I think is a great thing. Both of them are great things, but you're not going to get any enjoyment out of it. You have lost two super creative guys who gave me tons of enjoyment, and I want to warn you now, the more you whine, I thrive on that. I feed on it. So keep it up, because whining just makes guys like me stronger, but I'm not creative and I'm not making your life pleasant. Those guys made your life pleasant, and I think you chased them off. And so shame on you, you whiners. Remember, I'm not indicting all gamers, just the whiners. This week's next question comes from XXNike629XX. What is your take on game companies remastering games or remaking older games for newer consoles? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? You know, it's back to the question about GameStop selling retro games. If there's demand for it, it's a great idea. And if there's no demand for it, then it's a waste of money. So I think that, you know, the remastering of old games, we saw this with the Halo 1 Anniversary Edition Microsoft put out 10 years after. I think that's smart if they can make back their money. It doesn't cost that much to remaster, but still it's millions of dollars, probably 1 million, possibly more, to upscale. You're not going to see it with every game, but I think that some of the collector's edition PS2 games like Grand Theft Auto 3 probably would do very well. So again, profit deal. If the content owner can make money by reissuing the game, they're going to do so. If they can't, they're not going to do so. All right, fellow babies, that's it for this week's edition of Pach-Attack. If you have questions, please direct them to the link below. And if you'd like to ask me a question on Twitter, please send them to @MichaelPachter on Twitter and copy @RohanLikesPants, because Rohan likes pants.
See this and other GT shows and game reviews on the GT Originals iOS app, available now on the App Store.
Saddles. Wiggle, wiggle.
I watched The Moth. We have a, or you've been in our house, so our living room and our den kind of face either side of a fireplace. So we close the doors, the glass doors, when my kids are watching TV, so we don't have to listen to whatever their Disney shit. Anyway, there was a moth against the glass, and then he came all the way around through the kitchen and all the way around to our side and was on the glass. I was watching, I mean, the guy and then went out. Like, God, it was great. So I was thinking, I was watching the moth. Just reminded me, I was watching this moth, and he was like flying around the room. It was so crazy. He wanted to get out, and he figured it out. They must be able to smell the wind.
See this and other GT shows and game reviews on the GT Originals iOS app, available now on the App Store.